The first thing Elara noticed was not the color of the Alpha King's drink, but the smell beneath it. Moonberry wine should have carried a sharp sweetness with a clean herbal finish. This cup did, almost. Beneath the crushed berries and ceremonial spice, something metallic clung to the steam, faint enough that anyone passing through the hall would have missed it. Elara nearly did. Then Kale Draven reached for the silver cup. Her hand tightened around the tray. She had smelled something like that years ago among drying roots and spoiled tinctures, but memory was not proof. She could not name the substance. She could not even be certain it was poison. Around the high table, counselors and visiting delegates were already lifting their own drinks for the formal toast. One shouted accusation from an Omega maid could turn the reception into panic before anyone tested a thing. Kale's fingers closed around the stem. Elara moved. "Your Majesty." She stepped beside him as if correcting the service arrangement, set down her own cup, and shifted his half an arm's length away. Kale looked at her immediately. His gaze dropped to the two cups, then returned to her face. He had noticed. Of course he had. "What are you doing?" he asked quietly. Elara could hear the first words of the ceremonial blessing beginning at the far end of the table. There was no time to explain what she did not yet understand. She exchanged the cups. Then she took the one meant for him. Kale's expression hardened. "Stop." Elara drank. The wine touched her tongue with the expected sweetness first. Then came the bitterness. Not strong. Not enough to make anyone spit it out. Enough to tell her she had been right. Her pulse kicked violently. She set the cup down too fast. Silver struck wood. Kale rose. Elara. She had never heard him say her name before. Her fingers went numb. The room tilted, candlelight smearing into pale bands across her vision. She tried to breathe and found that her chest would not obey. Voices broke apart around her. Someone shouted for the royal healer. Another voice ordered the doors sealed. Her knees folded. Kale caught her before her head struck the edge of the table. His grip was firm, one arm braced behind her shoulders as the ceremonial hall erupted around them. Elara fought to keep her eyes open. Across the table, a servant reached toward the spilled wine with a cloth. Terror cut through the weakness faster than any command could. Elara caught Kale's sleeve. "The cups," she forced out. His attention snapped back to her. "Don't let them wash the cups." Kale looked once at the silverware, then over her head. "Nobody touches this table," he ordered. The room froze around the force in his voice. Elara tried to breathe again. This time nothing came but a thin, painful gasp. The last thing she saw before darkness closed over her was Kale turning the poisoned cup with two fingers, staring at it as if it had just rewritten the entire room. Elara woke to the smell of crushed herbs and bitter smoke. For several seconds, she did not know where she was. Then the ache in her chest returned, followed by the memory of silver, wine, and the Alpha King catching her before she fell. She tried to sit up. A sharp tremor ran through her arms. "Don't." The royal healer's voice came from beside the bed. "You're not ready." Elara lowered herself again, breathing carefully. Her mouth still tasted faintly metallic. The healer checked her pulse, her eyes, then the color of her lips. "You were lucky." "I know." Her voice sounded thin. "How lucky?" The healer hesitated. "You drank only a small amount. If you had finished the cup, we might be having a different conversation." Elara closed her eyes. She remembered Kale's hand catching her. She remembered the cup, the other drink. Preserved. The bottle. Preserved. Relief came before she could stop it. Then the door opened. Kale entered with two guards behind him. He had removed the ceremonial cloak, but he was still dressed for the reception. His expression was controlled, almost severe. His eyes settled on Elara, then on the healer. "Can she speak?" Briefly. Kale nodded. The guards remained outside as he approached the bed. He did not touch her. "Tell me exactly what you smelled." Elara swallowed. "Something metallic beneath the wine. Bitter. Faint. Poison." "I said it smelled wrong." "I did not know what it was. Yet you switched the cups." "Yes." His gaze sharpened. "Why?" "Because you were about to drink yours." Silence filled the room. Elara expected gratitude. Instead, Kale asked, "How did a maid recognize something the royal tasters did not?" The question hurt more than it should have. She looked toward the herbs hanging beside the healer's table. "Before palace service, I worked in an herb house. Dried roots. Medicinal leaves. Preparations. I learned sense because mistakes there could hurt people." "Could you identify the toxin now?" "No." She forced herself to be precise. Not from that amount. Not while sick. I recognized contamination. That is all. Kale studied her for another moment. Then we will treat it as evidence, not certainty. Elara blinked. He turned toward the guards. The cups, tray, bottle, and service record remained sealed. No one removes anything without my order. The healer gave a quiet nod. Kale looked back at Elara. You saved my life. That does not make your account exempt from examination. Good, she whispered. It shouldn't. Something shifted in his expression, almost respect, but it disappeared quickly. The healer examined the notes again. There is another problem. Kale turned. What? Her reaction was unusually fast. Elara opened her eyes. The healer continued. Faster than I expected from the substance we believe was present. Alara's weak fingers tightened against the blanket. She stared at Kale. What time were you supposed to drink? Kale answered without hesitation. The toast was scheduled for the third bell. Elara frowned. And when did you drink? Moments before it. No. Exactly when. His eyes narrowed slightly, as if he understood why the distinction mattered. At the first chime of the ceremonial blessing. Elara let the information settle. She remembered the hall. The musicians had stopped. The council speaker had raised his hand. Kale had lifted the cup just as the first note of the blessing sounded. Then she had switched it. How long between the first chime and the toast? She asked. Less than 2 minutes. The healer looked between them. Why does that matter? Elara tried to push herself. Upright again. Her arms shook, but this time she managed to remain seated. Because the poison reached me almost immediately. Kale's expression changed. You think it should have taken longer. I think I need to know exactly what was in that cup before anyone decides who did this. The door opened again. A royal investigator entered carrying a sealed evidence case. He bowed to Kale. Your Majesty, we have preliminary findings. Kale stepped aside. The investigator opened the case carefully and removed a small glass vial containing residue scraped from the silver cup. The royal alchemist confirms a toxic compound was present. We are still determining its precise composition. Elara watched the vial. And the second cup? Also preserved. The bottle? Sealed. The tray? Sealed. She exhaled slowly. At least the evidence had survived the panic. The investigator continued. There is one more matter. The service route has been reconstructed. The ceremonial bottle passed through a preparation station used by attendants assigned to the Eastern delegation. Kale's face became unreadable. The visiting delegation? Yes, Majesty. Elara looked at him. Who had access to that station? Several servants, the investigator said. But one attendant was seen there shortly before the bottle was transferred. Name? Kale asked. The investigator gave it. Elara recognized the name from the reception staff list. A servant attached to the rival pack. The room seemed to grow colder. That is enough to begin questioning, Kale said. Not enough to accuse, Elara replied. The investigator looked offended. Kale did not. He simply studied her. Why not? Because the scent proves something entered the drink. It does not prove who put it there. Her voice weakened, but she continued. And if the poison was prepared differently than the healers expect, the person who touched the bottle may not be the person who planned this. The investigator's jaw tightened. You are suggesting we ignore a direct connection. I am saying a connection is not the same as proof. Kale was silent for several seconds. Then he looked at the investigator. Bring me the service records, preparation, logs, and access list. The investigator bowed and left. Elara sank back against the pillow. Her head throbbed. Kale remained near the door. You could have let them take the obvious suspect, he said. Elara closed her eyes. Obvious is not the same as true. Kale's last words remained in the room after he left. Elara opened her eyes again and found the royal healer watching her with quiet concern. You should rest. I will, Elara said, after I understand the timing. The healer sighed but did not argue. Later, when the service records arrived, Elara was allowed to examine them from the bed because she still could not stand for long. The pages listed every movement of the ceremonial bottle, preparation room, Eastern service station, final tray, high table. The suspected attendant appeared exactly where the investigator had said. His access was real. The connection was real. But Elara kept returning to the healer's warning. Her reaction had been too fast. The royal alchemist eventually entered with a second report. We have narrowed the compound, he said. It appears to have been prepared in a form that becomes more active after exposure to the wine. Elara looked up. How long? That is still being tested. Could it have been active before the bottle reached the preparation station? Possibly. The alchemist glanced at Kale, who had returned without his guards. But the residue suggests recent mixing. Elara shook her head. Recent according to what? He frowned. According to the chemical state. And the temperature? What about it? The ceremonial wine was kept warm before serving. She pointed weakly toward the records. If the compound changed with exposure, the time between preparation and drinking matters. Kale moved closer to the table. How long was the bottle at each station? The investigator read from the log. Elara listened carefully. The sequence looked ordinary. Almost too ordinary. She asked for the serving schedule. It was brought to her. She compared it with the ceremony timetable. The bottle had reached the final station earlier than she expected. Kale was not supposed to raise his cup until the blessing began. Elara's fingers stopped on the page. There. Kale leaned over her shoulder. What? The timing. She traced the entries. The poison was not simply placed in the drink so you would die. Whoever prepared it knew when you were expected to drink. The healer stared at her. You are saying the timing was intentional? I am saying we have been asking the wrong question. Elara looked at the service record again. We started with who touched the bottle. But the better question is why this poison had to be prepared this way. Kale was silent. If you had drunk normally, Elara continued, your collapse would have happened at a predictable point during the ceremony. She swallowed against the lingering bitterness in her throat. And that point may have mattered more than the poison itself. Kale's eyes hardened. More than killing me. Maybe. Elara looked toward the sealed evidence case. If someone wanted everyone to believe the Eastern delegation had attacked you, they would not only need you poisoned. They would need you to collapse at the right moment. The room went quiet. Kale slowly straightened. The simple assassination theory no longer explained the evidence. Elara looked at him. Your security system did not miss a poison. She paused. It may have missed a schedule. The room remained silent until Kale turned toward the investigator. Show me the complete service record. The investigator hesitated. Your Majesty, that is the complete record. No, Kale's voice was quiet. That is the summary. He held out his hand. After a moment, the investigator produced a second folder. Elara watched as Kale opened it. The pages contained the movement of the ceremonial bottle, the preparation station, and the names of everyone assigned to each stage. Elara leaned closer. One entry had been marked after the ceremony. When was that added? She asked. The investigator looked at the page. It was entered during the security review. After I collapsed? Yes. Elara's stomach tightened. Who entered it? The investigator checked the notation. The record was transferred between officers. I would need to confirm the signature. Kale's expression darkened. Confirm it. The investigator bowed and left. Elara stared at the page. The Eastern delegation still appeared connected to the poison, but now the connection felt too convenient. Someone had known the exact route of the bottle, and someone had also known what happened after she collapsed. The healer approached with another report. Her reaction is stabilizing, he said. But she should not continue this. Elara looked down at her trembling hands. Her scent memory had already become unreliable. The room smelled of herbs, ink, metal, and smoke, all layered together. She could no longer separate them with confidence. That frightened her more than the weakness. If she could not trust her senses, she needed something else. Then we use what cannot change, she said. Kale looked at her. What? Where things were? Who touched them? When they moved? Before he could answer, the investigator returned. His face had changed. The original service sheet is missing. Kale's gaze hardened. Missing. The copy remains, but the signed original cannot be located. Elara closed her eyes briefly. The timing was too precise. Someone had allowed the obvious trail to remain while removing the document that could challenge it. Then the council will see the missing record as proof of foreign interference, she said. Probably, Kale replied. And they will demand action. He was right. The council had already scheduled an emergency session. If the Eastern delegation were blamed before the evidence was settled, their departure could become impossible without appearing like an admission of guilt. Elara forced herself to stand. Her knees nearly gave way. Kale caught her arm, but she pulled herself upright. I need to see the service station. You can barely stand. And my nose is worse than before. She met his eyes. That means I cannot solve this by scent. I have to solve it by sequence. Kale studied her for a long moment. Then he released her arm. You will have an escort. Elara shook her head. No. I need the people there to speak naturally. His jaw tightened. You are not walking into an investigation alone. Then come with me. For the first time, he did not answer immediately. Then he nodded. All right. The service station was quieter than Elara remembered. The ceremonial preparations had been cleared away, but traces of the evening remained. Empty trays, folded cloths, a rack of sealed bottles, and the faint smell of spilled wine beneath the sharper scent of cleaning herbs. Elara stopped at the doorway. Where was the bottle placed before it went to the final tray? The attending steward pointed toward a narrow counter near the rear wall. There. And who could reach it? The preparation staff. The Eastern delegation's attendant. Security officers. Elara stepped closer, studying the counter rather than smelling it. She forced herself not to rely on the sense that had already failed her. Who moved it from here? The steward checked the remaining log. 2 people. He named them. One was the attendant already connected to the Eastern delegation. The other was a senior palace official responsible for ceremonial security. Elara looked at Kale. He said nothing. Who knew the exact timing of the toast? She asked. The council speaker. The ceremonial staff. Security. The steward hesitated. And the royal schedule office. Elara felt the pieces shift without yet forming a complete picture. The rival attendant had access to the bottle. The palace official had access to the schedule. Either could have touched the drink, but the entire sequence required more than a single hand. She turned toward the tray rack. What happened to the bottle after the final service? It was returned here. By whom? The steward named the same senior security official. Elara's pulse quickened. And who handled the evidence after I collapsed? The steward looked toward Kale before answering. Security. Kale's face became still. Elara understood what that meant. The person who controlled the ceremonial route also controlled part of the evidence chain after the poisoning. But suspicion was not proof. She needed more. Your Majesty, she said. I think someone inside the palace used the Eastern delegation as the visible trail. Kale's gaze remained on the counter. I think so too. It was the first time he had agreed without qualification. Elara looked at him. Then why are you hesitating? Because if I accuse a member of my own security command without proof, I destroy the system that protects this palace. And if you protect the system before the truth, you protect whoever used it. His eyes met hers. For a moment neither spoke. Then Kale looked toward the door. The council meets before the next bell. Elara's stomach tightened. They are going to condemn the delegation. Unless we stop them. He stepped closer. You should leave the hearing to me. Elara shook her head. No, you are still recovering. Exactly. If you accuse one of your officers using my theory, they will say you are protecting the maid who saved you. His jaw tightened. I can handle the council. They can dismiss you as a king defending someone who risked herself for him. They cannot dismiss the evidence if I stand there and explain how I found it. Kale stared at her trembling hands. You could lose your position. I could lose more than that if I accuse the wrong person. She drew a slow breath. So I will not accuse anyone until I can prove the sequence. Kale was silent. Then he asked, What do you need from me? Elara met his eyes. Do not defend me before the evidence does. His expression changed, not with anger, but with understanding. Agreed. The council chamber was already full when Elara entered. Her legs felt unsteady beneath her, and every step reminded her that the poison had not entirely left her body. Conversations quieted as she crossed the room beside Kale. Several counselors looked at her with open doubt. Others looked at Kale as though waiting to see whether he would shield the maid who had taken the poison meant for him. At the center of the chamber lay the preserved evidence. The silver cup, the serving cloth, the remaining records. The Eastern delegation stood beneath guard along the far wall. Their representative demanded that they be released immediately. The council speaker raised a hand. We have sufficient reason to believe the Eastern delegation was involved in an attempt on the Alpha King. Elara stopped. No, every face turned toward her. The speaker frowned. You are the victim. Yes. Then you should understand the seriousness of what happened. I do. Elara looked at the evidence table. That is why I know the evidence is not complete. A murmur moved through the chamber. Kale remained silent. He did not step in to rescue her argument. Elara felt the weight of that silence. She had asked him not to defend her before the evidence did. Now he was keeping his promise. She pointed to the cup. This proves the drink was poisoned. Then to the service cloth. This connects the poison to the Eastern preparation station. Finally, she pointed toward the service records. And these records show who had access. The council speaker nodded. Exactly. Not exactly. Elara swallowed against the weakness in her throat. The poison reached me too quickly for the official preparation sequence to explain what happened. The senior investigator stepped forward. The alchemist has not completed his analysis. Then the council should not have completed its accusation. A few counselors shifted uneasily. The Eastern representative seized the opening. We have been accused on the word of a servant. Elara looked at him. No, you have been accused because someone made your servant look guilty. Silence followed. Kale's eyes remained fixed on the evidence. The investigator stepped forward again. There is a documented connection between your delegation and the preparation station. Yes, Elara said. And that connection may be real. But the question is whether it explains the timing. The investigator's expression hardened. You changed your account. Elara felt the accusation land. I corrected my first assumption. After discovering that the evidence pointed elsewhere. After discovering that my first assumption could not explain my own reaction. The council speaker looked toward Kale. Your Majesty, this is becoming speculation. Kale finally spoke. Then let her finish. The words were calm, but they carried across the chamber. Elara continued. If the Eastern attendant poisoned the drink alone, then he needed to know exactly when the Alpha would drink it. He also needed the poison to become active on that schedule. But there is another problem. She turned toward the evidence table. Someone altered the service record after I collapsed. A counselor stiffened. The original is missing. The investigator stepped forward. That proves nothing. Records disappeared during emergencies. Elara looked at him. Then why do you know what was written on the missing page? The investigator's face went still. I reviewed the record before it disappeared. Then tell the council what it said. He hesitated. Elara watched him carefully. It recorded the bottle leaving the preparation station earlier than the official summary states, he said at last. That is all. No, Elara said. That is not all. She turned toward Kale. The original record disappeared after the poisoning. But the palace keeps restricted copies of security transfers. Kale understood immediately. The investigator looked uneasy. Those records are sealed. By royal authority, Kale said. Open them. The chamber erupted in protest. The council speaker rose. Your Majesty, those records contain sensitive security information. Kale did not look at him. So does an assassination attempt. He gave the order. A guard left the chamber. Elara stood quietly while the room shifted around her. She could feel her strength draining again, but she refused to sit. The Eastern representative watched her with a mixture of anger and relief. If she was right, his delegation would be cleared. If she was wrong, he would be the first to demand her punishment. The records arrived minutes later. Kale opened the sealed packet himself. The first page confirmed the service sequence. The bottle had entered the final station earlier than the official report claimed. The second page recorded the security transfer after Elara collapsed. Elara pointed to a time notation. There. Kale read it. The bottle was moved before the security officer was supposed to receive it. The investigator stared at the page. Elara continued. And the person who authorized that movement had access to the royal schedule. The council speaker looked toward the senior palace security official standing near the chamber doors. The official's face remained controlled. Many officers had schedule access. Not to the private timing of the toast, Elara said. Only a few did. The official stepped forward. This proves nothing. You are building a story from timing. Elara looked directly at him. Then why did you just call it the private timing of the toast? Silence fell. The detail had not been stated aloud in the chamber. The official realized his mistake a second too late. The council turned toward him. He tried to recover. I meant the ceremonial schedule. No, Elara said. You knew which part mattered. Kale's gaze hardened. How did you know? The official said nothing. Elara finally understood the complete pattern. The poison was never meant only to kill you. Kale looked at her. Explain. It was prepared so your collapse would happen at the moment the ceremony made the Eastern delegation look responsible. If you had drunk normally, the timing would have created the accusation before anyone questioned the drink. She pointed to the records. The bottle was prepared early enough for the toxin to activate on schedule. The Eastern attendant provided the visible trail. Then the security chain preserved that trail and removed the record that could expose the timing. The official backed away. That is speculation. No, Elara said. The speculation ended when you revealed knowledge you were never supposed to have. The council chamber erupted. Kale raised one hand. Everyone fell silent. He looked at the official, then at the evidence, then back at Elara. For a moment, he said nothing. Then he ordered the guards to take the official into custody. No roar. No threat. Just a decision grounded in evidence. The Eastern delegation was released from accusation, and the council's planned retaliation collapsed with the false story. Elara's knees weakened. Kale caught her arm, but this time he did not pull her closer than she allowed. You were right, he said quietly. Elara shook her head. Not at first. You corrected it. He looked toward the evidence table. And I would not have seen what my own security system was hiding without you. The chamber emptied slowly, leaving behind the evidence table, the abandoned accusation, and the silence that followed a truth no one could easily undo. The Eastern delegation was released. The security official who had manipulated the records was taken into custody for formal judgment, and the remaining palace security records were ordered reviewed. No one announced that the kingdom had suddenly become wiser. The consequence was smaller, harder, and real. The system Kale had trusted would have to change. Elara was given time to recover before any decision about her future was made. When the healer finally allowed her to walk without an escort, Kale came to find her in the quiet herb room. The council has offered you a position, he said. Elara looked up from the dried leaves arranged across the table. What position? Contamination review and medicinal stores. Independent authority over the work. She studied him. Because I saved you. Because you proved you can do it. His answer came without hesitation. Those are not the same thing. Elara looked down at her hands. The tremor was almost gone. Her sense of smell was returning, though she no longer trusted it blindly. She had learned something more important from the poisoning than the identity of an enemy. Skill could begin the search. It could not finish it alone. Evidence had to survive. Assumptions had to be challenged. Trust had to be earned. I will accept, she said, but I choose who works under me. Agreed. And no one can remove me from the position because I am an Omega. Kale's expression softened. Agreed. She looked at him for another moment. You really are going to make me negotiate every condition? You told me once not to defend you before the evidence did. A faint smile touched his mouth. I am learning. The words were simple, but Elara believed them because he had already paid for them with action. He had opened restricted records. He had allowed her evidence to stand without taking control of it. He had not turned her sacrifice into a claim over her. The room grew quiet. Kale glanced toward the table. There is one more thing. He placed 2 silver cups beside each other. Elara stared at them. They were almost identical to the ones from the reception. For a moment, the old fear returned, the metallic scent. The collapsing room, his arm catching her. Kale did not touch either cup. He simply waited. No ceremony, she asked. No council. No guards. Outside. Elara leaned closer. Habit made her check the first cup, then the second. Nothing seemed wrong. Kale watched her with restrained amusement. Still checking. Always. She chose one cup and pushed the other toward him. His fingers closed around it. At the beginning, she had switched their drinks because she could not trust anyone else to keep him alive. Now she moved a cup toward him for an entirely different reason. She trusted him to let her choose. Kale raised his cup slightly. Elara raised hers. No claim was spoken. No bond was demanded. She took the first sip because it was her choice, then looked across the table at the Alpha King and smiled. This time, neither of them was drinking for someone else.